I'm Josh Cooperman. This is the Convo by Design Icon Registry, November 2024 induction, whose recipient has been on the show individually, part of a panel, part of a smaller group, virtually, and in person. It's amazing. He's done all of this while simultaneously rising to principal of one of the most incredible architecture firms of the modern era. Brian, how's that for a lead-in? The Brian I'm referring to is the most recent inductee into the Convo by Design Icon Registry. It's Brian Pinkett, principal of Landry Design Group. When I first started this program back in January of this year, I wanted to recognize some of the most extraordinary individuals who have honored me and us with their presence on the show. Those who have lent their exceptional talents to their chosen profession and made this world better than they found it. Brian Pinkett is one of those people through his exceptional design skills, of course. But that's nowhere near where the story lies. He's a great architect. That would be one thing. Every architect I speak with on the show is the best at what they do. They're all great. Every designer who appears on the podcast is the best at what they do. They're all great. The difference is between the lines. You might have heard my most recent conversation with Pinkett a few months back. He and I met at Design Hardware in Los Angeles for a day of design, a designer showcase, really, and he shared his philosophy and practical application of getting the absolute best out of the architects in his charge. We discussed how he approaches teamwork, mentorship, and challenging those who want to be exceptional at what they do. That's Brian's superpower. And he's made a number of young architects exceptional at what they do by finding ways to bring it out of them, to bring out the best through their work. In the past, I shared my background in broadcasting, working in radio for decades prior to finding my passion that led to our weekly chats here at Convo by Design. I wish I could tell you that I had some great mentors during my career in radio. I didn't. Broadcast radio is a cutthroat business that feeds on its young. I don't know a better way to say it. It's transactional, it's ephemeral, it's temporary. The secret is, it's no different than most industries. Most people never have a Brian Pinkett to guide them. Brian's clear-eyed with regard to his mentorship approach, and it's in the same way that he's clear-eyed in his design work. Brian is exceptional at what he does, and so we're going to celebrate his installment in the Convo by Design Icon Registry by looking back at one of his previous appearances on the show. I selected the panel conversation from the West Edge Design Fair in 2019 since we just celebrated another fantastic West Edge Design Fair. This conversation was titled Design Diversity, Crafting Our World the Way It Should Be. This was the first conversation of its kind at a design fair. It was a conversation about race and design, about meritocracy, and making the tent bigger for all who have something to offer. It was pre-COVID, and before George Floyd's murder set off a revolution in the United States. This conversation also features Ron Woodson, Bridget Coulter, Cheadle, and Breegan Jane. It was an exceptional conversation, and it was part of a panel, and it was part of a group. One of the areas in which Brian Pinkett thrives. And so I thought it would be a perfect way to look back and celebrate Brian and his contributions to both Convo by Design, but also to design itself, architecture itself, and society in general. The November 2024 Convo by Design Icon Registry inductee, Brian Pinkett.
This year has been crazy for a lot of us. We've seen a lot of things. We've had friends who are affected by different things. We've seen things on the news that have affected us greatly, and it's made us think. In preparing for the programming this year, I wanted to do things that would make you think as well, that would give you an opportunity to have conversations that maybe we just haven't had before. In 7 years of the podcast and literally 500 plus interviews, 200 plus panels, I've never heard a conversation about diversity in design. And we had a phone call about this very subject, and some interesting thoughts came up. Well, this isn't the place for it. And who's the one to tell the story? If not now, then when? If not us, then who? Right? To me, design is all about inspiration. If you are only getting messages from one source, how inspiring can that possibly be? Diversity, in my opinion, is kind of what makes the world go round. So I wanted to put together a panel that is truly unique, truly individual. And so I'm trying to think, Brig and Jane, we had our interview a couple of months ago. Bridget, we met at Legends on La Cienega for the LCDQ this year. Ron, we've known each other forever. Not forever, but it's been a minute. And Brian, we first spoke last year on this very stage. I have a tremendous amount of respect for these individuals, and I will be honest with you and tell you that when putting this particular panel together, I was not 100% confident. I was a little nervous. You know, this is a big issue. This is a big topic, and it's important. And it's not about redecorating, and it's not about what's new, what's now, what's next. It's about who we are. What's our story, and how do we want others to see us, and how do we want others to think of us? So with that, we put together a panel with these amazing individuals, these amazing creatives, and I wanted to give them the opportunity, and I think you pretty much decided this as well, to tell their stories as they see it. So this is a non-moderated panel. This is a free flow, this is a conversation, and I have been looking forward to it for a very long time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian. I'm gonna let you start.
Hello, am I on?
Take it away. Yes, you are.
Am I on? Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. We are very excited to be here today, and it's important for us to have this conversation because each and every one of us has come to this place in a different path, and we want to share that with you. And we also want to share some concerns that we have about what's going on in the world today with regard to design and diversity. One thing that we'd love to do is to have your participation. So first question, are there any designers or architects out there? Anyone? Yes? Okay, we're going to be pointing to all of you guys first. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for being here. We want this to be informative for you and to be able to answer questions and have a discussion that's interesting to you. So we're not going to wait till the end to say, do you have questions? We'd like to open it up right now, right away, and see what's on your mind and as regard to diversity in design, okay? So we're going to start there. Do you guys want to say anything else before we get this thing going?
I might hit up some of my friends in the audience. You guys know who you are.
Yeah.
I just would say I want to thank you guys for coming to listen to this panel because it is a conversation that sometimes can be uncomfortable, and I really appreciate Josh. Really, one thing that's great about him is he loves to learn about people. He's truly interested in thought and thinking, and design is a really important aspect of our world. Our whole world is designed, and if we're not thinking about diversity and we're not looking at inclusion, what are we doing, and who is telling our story?
Right. And diversity across the board. I'm going to start with experience here. I've been a designer for 20 plus years, even though I'm only 26. And my background just in life in general, I hate it when people say, oh, I don't see color. But I grew up in a house, my father was a jazz musician, and we had every nationality, color running in and out of our house. And I was fortunate at a very young age to be able to, my father was in a trio that worked at Doris Duke's house, her personal parties. And so as a kid, I would run up and down the halls of her house. And when my mother was pregnant with me, she bought me my first christening outfit because she liked my dad so much. And so from a very early age, I was exposed to this grandeur of life and design that I thought, everybody sort of lived that way or had that kind of lifestyle. And it wasn't until, being around other family members that I saw, okay, there is a disparity on how a lot of different people live. And my parents had to rein me in because I could be a little bratty sometimes, thinking, this is the way of the world, and it wasn't. And so I was fortunate enough to have that background growing up. And so when I started design, it was my own style. I didn't look at it as I'm an African American man who is in design. I've never had an issue, I don't think, that I know of, being African American in the design world. However, I've seen and noticed clearly, especially when I started, there weren't a lot of African American men. There were more women, and there are more now, thank goodness. But and not even just African American, just people of color in general. And I didn't see color. I'm going back to that first mantra that I mentioned, and I think my story is very broad stroke, that I've enjoyed interior design, and I've tried to be inclusive of all nationalities and try to bring this consciousness of diversity to my work. And so I'm hoping, that I can share that. I've never talked about that in a setting like this, because I'm looking out in the audience at friends that I have here, and that subject just never comes up. They like me because I'm Ron, and they like me because I'm talented at what I do, and I'm a good person. But at the same time, this subject needs to be pushed. We need to have more of a conscious effort to see a broader stroke than one perspective. I know that might have been long, but...
That's perfect.
Well, I think part of what I hear you speak to is one of the things that I feel fortunate about being in design is that it's really sort of based on art and culture, and it's this visual representation that has always been a great medium for minorities, for very specific cultural elements, because what we do is celebrate the visual. So, in sort of that leadership in an industry, I think we need to follow the way that artisans have, that we have the ability to be seen as human in this world, because it's created off of a visual color palette that is inclusive of everyone. So if we can't have this conversation, who can? And so thank you, and I feel blessed to be here, and it isn't something we have to talk about a lot, and I think that is one of the positives, but I appreciate this panel and being a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? We'd love to hear from you when you read diversity in design. What came to your mind at that point? Does anybody want to share? Please. We got a mic coming. Hold on one second.
So when I was looking at the program and going through all of the other panels and everything, I saw oh, no diversity. So it has to be more than on one panel. It has to be spread across the whole program with West Edge and everywhere else. It can't just be, we put them in a room, we talk to them, and we did our diversity for the year. No. When I look at that program, it should be diverse in all kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Please.
I'm wondering is, when you're designing, do you consider in California our fires? Are your buildings designed to maybe with certain types of materials that could slow or protect the home? You know, here in California, I didn't know if that was even thought about when you're designing property. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you understand my question?
I do understand your question, John, and I want to just be clear. So when you read diversity in design, that was the first thing that came to your mind? Okay, so with the fires, it's come up. So let's touch on the fires, because it's this travesty. It's unfortunate that we live in this amazing place, and every year we have to watch our backs for these fires, and sometimes they're accidents, and sometimes they're actually set. But to answer your question, there are materials that you can use to sort of repel, but there's nothing that's going to stop the heat of a fire as it's coming through a forest. It's almost impossible. It's Mother Nature. It's nothing you can really do to stop it. So working with the fire department, there are things that we do as architects that are preventative, like cutting back the shrubs and the landscaping to keep but the embers fly. And if they catch the roof or something like that, it's really tough. And I commend the people that stay at their homes and try to fight it. But at the same time, there's nothing more important than your life, and it's not worth it. It's material, you know. What we get to do up here is actually fun. We get to live our lives through you, with you, as we work on your projects and realize your dreams. So there's no material thing that's more important than the human life. So thanks, John.
Can I ask one question back
Please.
to the young lady's question? With regard to that, with regard to diversity in design, panels like events like this, maybe other domestic events, maybe maison, salone. What do you see? You've all been around. Do you see diversity? Do you ask questions about inclusion? Do you feel maybe like you shouldn't? What do you do? Is it an issue that you want to see pushed?
So I'll go. There's diversity wherever I go, because I'm there. Okay? So that answers your question. There's a level of comfort that we give to our clients and the people that we're dealing with to, one, let them know that we're capable of doing what we are capable of doing without the color or without the background or baggage that some people might bring. Fortunately for us, the people that are attracted to us, they don't necessarily see that color.
Right.
And the people who are here, I would imagine, are interested in having this conversation because they want to have more of this conversation so that it spreads throughout the country, right, and the world. So I think, obviously, in this day and age, with what's going on with our president and the political scene, we need to have more conversations about it. And it's going to be up to us and people like you, Josh, who produce these events, to really bring it to the forefront.
And I think to the young lady's point is that idea that it should infiltrate everything. It's a diverse world we live in, but there is this sense of exclusivity. And in my mind, that's broken down by media, by perception, by social media, and what we put out there. And I know I've been approached for projects to do a cover on a magazine, or somebody looking at a project, and I've been told things where I've seen something similar, and sometimes there's a resistance or there's a story that they want to tell that you don't fit, and then there's other stories where they want to tell that you fit, but not just fitting you in the diversity story, but just treating you like a designer. And my experience, I've been doing design for 15 years, and I have that experience of, I'm a multicultural Black woman, and I've traveled, and I've been very lucky. And like what Ron said, is your background and your story, and all of that filters who you are as an artist. And I've been lucky to grow up in this craftsman home in Berkeley, and come down to Southern California, live in Africa, in London, and I've lived around the world. And that filter, it informs my work. And I think that the people who hire me or who are drawn to my work feel this global collected thing, this flavor and texture that they want, and that's part of them. They're traveled. And I don't think we have the color conversation, although I'm very like, yeah, I'm who I am, and I'm very proud, and I think it makes me better at what I do. And I think that conversation of not seeing color is uncomfortable to me, because I actually want you to see my color, and I'm proud of it, and it's part of me, just like you want me to see that you're a woman, or if you're very proud of your religion, you're like, this is part of who I am. We listen to our clients, and we want to make sure we're reflecting them as well.
Right.
I think one misnomer sometimes that people have, and you speak about diversity, is, okay, we've got a panel of all African Americans, and sometimes people will think, oh, they're just gonna want to have African art in the design that they're gonna put in my house. Completely not true. And I've talked to some of my Asian counterparts about this subject, and some have said the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm not coming, and I'm not going to be putting all Asian art in your house. But sometimes people have this perception. I've not had it, but it is something that I think sometimes people should take a look at. You can't pigeonhole a group of people who are not the majority that they're going to do and design one particular way. And because clearly, if you look at the breadth of work that I have done over the years, I mean, it's kind of all over the board, but there's a common thread. I mean, I just like good design, and I like glamorous design, and to me that has no face, no color, I just like good design, and that's where it ends. And I think that's how it should be looked at, but at the same time, more people of color should have inclusion. And sometimes I think younger African Americans, I mean, because I get people, young designers who have reached out to me for a long time. I'm a mentor to a lot of them, and some of their stories are varied, and some feel, how can I start? I'm not going to be accepted, and it's like, no, you got to get out there, and your work has got to be what is going to propel you. You can't sit back and say, well, I'm African American and they're not going to like me, or they're not going to like my designs. You got to push.
Mm-hmm. Very good. We had another question over here.
Hi, I work more in the commercial space and on the construction side of the design build world, and I will say that it's a bit of a different story in that realm, because when you get into larger firms and in the larger capital projects, very often I get a sense that you do feel that resistance. And certainly intersectional issues of being a Black female, where you are second guessed quite a bit. So despite having the education, and as you progress more and more, the experience in the field. So I do think there are some challenges in which we do have to keep pushing. I think on the residential side, social media has helped leaps and bounds in terms of helping African American designers and other designers of color tell their story, and to get more entree into publication space. Because if you look at the history of LA and some of the buildings that have been built and the designs, we have a large gap in that participation of African American architects in building large commercial spaces. And you have to sit back and say, well, why do we have this gap? Why aren't they not, getting those jobs?
So interesting to me. Yeah, I think one of the things that I find as a young African American woman is most of my clientele is middle-aged, Caucasian, and male. That's who pays me. That's what I grew my female-based company off of. And I think that there's a lot of leadership opportunity being in a minority position in anything, because you understand the responsibility of standing up for what isn't popular or common thought or seems outside of the box, right? So I find that I'm constantly pushing my boundaries on cultural references that I want to bring into design elements. And if I'm like, I'm too scared to, use this Cuban thing or this Tongan thing because I might not know every inch of it, I notice that I push myself a lot in doing what's uncomfortable, because I think at a certain level, that's why we're not seeing enough of it. People are always scared to merge what they don't know, and they're afraid of asking the wrong question or offending somebody, and when you do that, that creates the division. I think all of us see the word diversity, and we're scared of it to begin with because it comes with this divide. Whereas we are in an artistic, medium, good design pushes the rules. Like when we walk through here and we see all of the things that we love, it's because they're a little unusual, not because it's the common norm. So I find that this is a great place to be in sort of celebrating diversity. And I think that a lot of times that person, or for me on the commercial side, they are longing for somebody to push them in what their building looks like, and they might not be the representative to do it, so they depend on designers to sort of bring in this habitat that is just in New York City. And you look at the amount of people interacting with a space, and as a designer, I want that to feel the same no matter what age, race, you are. And so when you're creating a space that's inclusive of everyone, especially in commercial spaces, you want a representative who's not going to be afraid to include everybody. And I think that puts a lot of responsibility on all of us as humans to create habitats that work for anyone.
Mm-hmm. And I think to add and more tie into what you do is that as designers, we're comfortable with who we are, where we come from, and so when people push, we don't push back. We just listen and let our work speak for itself. And if they're not interested in looking or seeing our work and what we're doing, that's on them, not on us, because we're committed to giving our very best each and every time. So that might help apply to your situation.
I mean, that's how we approach our projects. For those of you that don't know me, I have a business partner who is blonde, and she's half Italian, half Mexican. And I've seen, far as diversity, I've seen her have more problems, especially with contractors. She's very glamorous, and those that really know her, she wears heels all the time, and she goes on job sites that way. And some of these big burly contractors want to challenge her, and she's not to be messed with. She doesn't play. But I've seen where she's had more challenges than I've thought I've ever had, far as any type of resistance. this little lady is not going to tell me what to do. And I've seen that where contractors, for the most part, will gravitate toward me first, because we work on every single project together. And we both protect one another, and we don't let that happen. But I can see how what you're saying. I think too, in certain levels of design, I think it's more sexist than the division of color. Has been more my experience.
That I do design build at the same time, so I know that experience and having a contract. But because I am the client in the project, I have my clients and my design build. It's I don't know. Maybe I enjoy a little bit of the came onto a project and I'm knowledgeable. We also all have achieved a level of excellence through hard work, and as you probably heard, people of color tend to rise very high to the top to be visible. And I had someone come in and immediately fold his arms, darling, how high, darling, where's the person? Like, who can I talk to? It's like, I'm the person. Well, what do you know about roofing and this? And I know enough. I'm not a roofer, but I do build houses. And by the end, and he had a Mexican-American assistant who was with him, who was just like looking, this is just an experience, probably similar to things you've faced in the commercial space. And he starts to giggle because the guy says, I just say to him, I'm actually trying to hire you and pay you money to do a job that I respect you know about, but I won't be talked to that way. I'm really not your darling. Oh, one of them. And if I wanted another ex-wife, I would have, just those things that you hear, but I just take it as a business. And I said, I'm probably not going to be able to hire you because you probably don't respect, I've done these drawings that you're supposed to. And his assistant was just kind of giggling. And those are experiences you just go through, but as the boss, you just find people. You can't necessarily educate everyone, and not everybody wants to learn. He's set in his ways, but the people that I do work with I feel very lucky. They're very wonderful, and they just want good work. They just want us to do good work. So it's an inclusion thing, and it's not just, like you said, it's not just black and brown, and diversity is, physically handicapped. There's so many different levels of people who aren't seen and are doing work. So I think this conversation is important, and acknowledging people's experience.
Yeah, and the reality is, we grew up in a time where it was changing, right? Everyone's talking about how the divide is shrinking, but the reality is it never has really. And for me growing up, like I went to 10 different schools. I grew up in the ghetto. Went to 10 different schools, made it to Ivy League. And along the way, I'm sure I didn't see nearly half of what was actually being thrown at me because I couldn't be bothered with it. I had to be focused on getting to where I needed to be so that I could get out and be successful. So people are pulling you down. It's like crabs in a barrel. They're grabbing you as you're trying to get out, and you just got to keep marching forward. And a lot of times you just have to forget about what happened, kind of block it out of your mind, and just keep going. Keep working hard. Stay later, stay longer, do more to be successful. And that's just the reality of the world. Yeah.
Question. Sort of circling back on the exposure and media. As the associate publisher of Interiors California magazine, super proud of Bregan's, 6 pages in there this month? Absolutely beautiful. If you want to see it when you leave, there are copies on your chair. Absolutely wonderful. Do you feel challenged by the amount of coverage that you get? Do you feel that being of color, you have to work harder? Do you feel that the editors don't necessarily seek your stories out? Not even like they're maybe not as a intentional snub. Maybe it is, I don't know. But do you feel that you don't get exposure because of that?
I have to say I haven't felt that. And we've been in over now probably 70, 80 publications around the world. But again, it goes back to the work has spoken for itself. And that, I think, has been the driving force of why our work has been published. It's just the work, not who Jamie and I are. Yes, we tout ourselves as being nice people, but the work is what really drives where we've gotten.
I think it's a good question. I'm actually seeing a bit of a shift in publication where the work isn't as important to the publicist as who it was for. Popularity, celebrity, they're moving to the top of the list more and more. Luckily for us, we have some of those clients, so it supports us. But when a really good project gets pushed off to the side because some celebrity wants their house in the magazine, that's when it becomes a problem. At least I believe it's a problem. Because now you guys aren't really getting the quality of the work, you're just getting the story. So everything becomes a tabloid. You know, Instagram, the magazines, everything is, you know, TMZ. You know, that's not really a way to learn and grow as a culture. So that's what I'm seeing. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I find that I think one of the things about sort of the visual representation of what a designer is versus actually working and build and design, like cross-culturally, design really sort of is a global thing. Textiles are global, influences are global. So we sort of are, I think, this great representation of something that's very accepting, but then we've all been to the marketplaces and we see that there's not enough in leadership roles, I think, that are representative of all the visual artistic elements that we see that are so stunning. So I think that there's still a challenge in sort of that, like more of us and across the board in a bunch of different colors. But the nice thing is that the end result is celebrating, I think, a lot of us and a lot of different visual mediums, because that's what creates good design. And to just speak for a second on the build side, I find it very interesting that I think one of the things that design brings is that there is a lot of minority that supports the entire industry. And so there is a standard of Spanish on construction sites, or I get my stone from Italy, so I'm going to deal with Italians. There is this sort of base to what we do in the industry that we're in that allows us to crisscross a lot more. And I think it does pave the way for this industry to be a leader in this conversation, because everyone has to deal with somebody that looks different if you're gonna be in design, whether that's making a custom table or importing something. And I think that's a positive.
And I think it's great. Even more important, you see that more here in Los Angeles than other places. I mean, colleagues around the country they always marvel over what we can do in Los Angeles, because literally we don't have to leave here. We can have anything made here in Los Angeles. And artisans, as you said, I mean, I have them across the board here in Los Angeles. I mean, everybody makes something. And they don't get the recognition a lot of times, because fortunately not maybe fortunately, but it's our designs, and a lot of them are behind the scenes, and we get the credit for it. So those artisans aren't really seen and spoken about.
Yeah, and I think to speak to leadership, I think leadership in representation is you tend to reflect what you know and who you know. So the more that we have conversations and this is pushed forward, the more change happens. And in the art world, I'm incredibly impressed. And when I was at Armory, New York, I thought is this a black art show? I was like, I don't remember Armory being this, but it really is a movement towards just good work and interesting work and compelling work. So if those galleries are taking an artist and they're placing them in these shows, they're going to be seen. And that's the equivalent of us getting a magazine or a cover. And I don't, to answer your question, Josh, I feel like I was warmly welcomed in the press world. And it got overwhelming. I was like, oh yeah, I have to hire a press person because I was designing furniture and textiles. And there's just a hunger for this trying to change. I literally stopped press a few years ago because I couldn't work. So I think I just was like, I just need to go back and be a worker bee. I'm more comfortable there. But I also know that I was excited about this panel because we have to be seen, and people have to know this is a career. It's something I've done since I was 12 years old. I've remodeled my parents' houses on graph paper, and I didn't know it as a career. So if they see that this is a career, and it's pretty wonderful, and everyone here's work is I'm a big fan of, and honored to sit on the stage with, but at the same time, you were talking about mentorship and being seen, and that's another part of visibility that's incredibly important, is that they see excellent work happening by a diverse group of people.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about social media, that social media has really helped up-and-coming designers of color to show their work, and for them to have an outlet to reach out to others. Like I said, I get direct messages all the time on Instagram, and I answer every single one of them. And one right now is an intern of ours who is actually going to be a full-time employee. But she reached out on Instagram, and she does great work, and we love having her around.
Along those lines, I think it's really interesting. When we had our call, Brian, you knew at a very early age what you wanted to do. Bridget, you knew at a very early age what you wanted to do. Bregan, I think, we talked and you kind of found your way. And Ron, you've been around creatives your entire life. I was speaking with Gene Brownhill.
But I found my way too. I didn't start in design. I found my way as well.
Yeah. And I was speaking with Gene Brownhill, CEO of Sweeten, on Friday. And it reminded me of the conversation that we had where she didn't know at an early age about architecture and design, build. And I think it's interesting because young people of color, I grew up in a house of significant architecture. When you talk to people, neighborhoods of significant architecture, it may be, they know what it is. We talked about not having access or providing access to youth. Where do you think that starts? And what do you see? And I know that each of you have expressed some level of participation. I find that really interesting as well. Care to share?
Again, going back, I was very fortunate that I had family that really exposed me. But I saw the difference within my family, other family members, cousins, and that kind of thing, that were not as exposed as I was. My parents were able to afford a nice lifestyle for my sister and I. And I think, again, exposure at a very early age. Like you said, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was redesigning my parents' house when my father traveled a lot, so my mother and I, he never knew what our house was going to look like when he came home, because we would always change it around. And she indulged me in that. And I didn't think, like you said, I didn't think it was ever going to be a career for me. It came later. My first degree is in finance. And the corporate life wasn't for me at all. So, but I think in schools and when I was growing up, schools, there were field trips. You got exposed to things, and these kids now, the arts programs are being ripped out in record numbers. A lot of kids. I was just talking to a school administrator. They don't even have PE in schools anymore. I was like, what? That's unheard of. And the arts programs are all but gone. So if you don't see that, if you don't learn about that early on, it's a challenge, I can imagine, for those coming up, because it starts, it's in you very early. I'm sure, Brian, like you said, you knew very early on, but a lot of times young kids don't have that guidance, and it starts there.
Yeah, it's opportunity. I'm friends with the dean at SciArc, and one of my best friends from Cornell is now the dean over at USC, and we had lunch the other day, and we were talking about this diversity in the school, like how it's shifting, who's enrolling. College right now, it's so difficult to get into colleges. So whereas designers may be creative, their scores might not be the highest to get into school. And it's just unfortunate that the way that the system is set up isn't necessarily for people to be creative and find their passion and their outlet. And I think it's up to us and all of you here who are conscious of this to sort of go back and mentor and share your experiences with young people, because that's one of the big concerns of mine. I founded a nonprofit. It's called Legacy Kids Project, where kids in the inner city get to develop projects for legacy in their community. So they get to design it, they get to execute it, and then we fund it for them. So it's the exposure, like Ron is saying. We've got to give them exposed to it. What are the opportunities? I never thought I was going to get into Ivy League school. His counselor was like, "You're never going to get in." And what got me in was my talent. At 18, I was fortunate, exposure again, to be in an area where there was a competition for high school seniors, and whoever won the competition, their house got built. So I said, in 9th grade, that's going to be me one day. And luckily, knock on wood, it happened. And so for me, it was just driving and pushing and believing in myself and knowing that there is a way. Not every kid, especially in diverse communities, know that's even possible. And the way the media talks now, it's either, it used to be sports, and now it's acting and it's music. So the media moves kids around the different ways. That is what you should be or what you should look like. And whether you're African American or white or whatever nationality or religion, that sort of drives them. Like their kids are playing Fortnite. I don't even know what Fortnite is, but is it going to get them anywhere? Who knows? Maybe it will. But the opportunity needs to be given to them so that they can actually see their possibilities. And that's what I encourage all of us to do, participate.
I think that one of the realities about interior design is that it's sort of a luxury. Like, people who are hiring interior designers usually have an ability to fund that sort of a project and be able to do that. And I think because of the nature of design being born out of this luxury market, we're not always including it as available to the masses. It's not shown everywhere because it's sort of the thing the rich and famous have. At the same time, I think really there's also this entire juxtaposition where we all have human basic needs, and one of those is shelter. And I think our grandmothers, our friends, they were the first homemakers. Like, some of the coolest things were made by hand out of a need to cover a window. And so the more that we can bridge those things together, I think this whole DIY world is an area where we can really flourish, because everything's very farmhouse, and that's great. But DIY is also in textiles and in mediums and in art. And so I'd like to make more of that accessible, because it's not a luxury thing to love how you feel in the place where you spend time. And if that's a small box, like, the guys over here that are doing small, tiny houses have made this comeback, that creating a space that you can thrive in, right? Like individually for our clients, they hire us because they want to thrive in the space. Like it is approachable and it will improve your life. I think what we do helps people, but you can do it in 300 square feet.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
And also, really, what we're all talking about at some core is visibility and people being able to see it, and young people who are thinking of careers understanding that this is a possibility, because there is, like you said, my grandmother used to quilt, and I always thought they were cool and loved them, and these quilts are beautiful. They're still beautiful, and she still has them, and there's fractal geometry. There's some inherent DNA where it's like, African villages are based on the most complex mathematics known, but you think you're just I've walked through them and go, why is this perfect? And villages have 12 mothers, and there's just all of these things that are through travel and DNA and work that adds an excellence to what we're striving for now. And I didn't know design was my first. I did it, but I didn't know it was a career. And I'm on my 5th career where I just started a co-working space for women, all about this, about access, who are doing different. But what I'm learning about having this space is the amazing work that is happening in small, quiet ways that doesn't necessarily have visibility. So I always think visibility, a home, a place to find each other is important, and then to amplify that, which social media does, people having conversations like this. But again, this has to be filtered through all of West Edge and not Diversity Hour, unfortunately, but it's a start.
Fantastic. Thank you. We got to wrap it up now. Is there any more questions? We want to make sure we touch on to all your questions. Yeah. 1 second. We're going to get you the mic.
Now, I've been going to these design events for quite a while. I graduated school back at 83, licensed architecture 92.
Yes.
And I've been in the luxury space since then, have my own business. And I've gone to many of these West Week events, LADQ, and I never see black faces, rarely. And to have a panel like this is very inspiring to people who want to get into the profession, and I would encourage you to keep having these panels. But my question is, what approach would you take, you mentioned mentoring, to get more diversity in the profession, in the luxury design space?
Hiring.
Yeah, there you go.
Mentoring and hiring, and then continue mentoring. So in my firm, I started a mentorship program for everyone. You have to keep it going. And so people at my firm will tell their friends, hey, you should come over here because this is what they're doing to help us grow. And, once you get to a certain age, you realize it's not for you. It's to pass on. And so whether you're in a college or at a high school or at one of these events, it's really to just share the possibilities for these kids. And if you have any information or knowledge that you're holding on to, please share any way you can. Yeah. Okay.
Anything to add?
You good? Oh, we're good. I want to say one thing. I want to thank all of you for being here, and all of you who came in late. Thanks for staying. I just met my colleagues here the first time today, and I think they're fantastic. And Josh, I want to thank you for putting this up together, because I've got friends for life, and we're going to do some big things, I can tell, from this one panel.
I know you are. And ladies and gentlemen, please, a hand for our panelists. Thank you so much for participating. Really appreciate it.
First, just let me say thank you to Bridget, Ron, and Bregan, also for being a part of this important conversation. And thank you, Brian, for being a part of this conversation, as well as all the others that we've had on Convo by Design, as well as the ones we've had in private. And always being willing to share what you know with anyone who will listen. Congratulations on your addition to the Convo by Design Icon Registry. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your skill. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. Thank you to my partner sponsors, Design Hardware, Thermosol, TimberTech, Monogram, and Pacific Sales. These are amazing partners all. They support the trade, and I love sharing these resources with you. Thanks again for listening. Until next week, be well, and take today first.